Let's start by asking Emily and Elisheva. You did do it. Good. Oh, sure. Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
But not when the timer said.
Okay.
Right,
well, that's a start. That's a start.
But it still made me force me to do it. So I'm like,
yeah.
I don't want to come to class and say.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I did it.
Good for you. Oh, really?
Section.
Wow. Nice. So, how long did the process from reading the directions to finishing the whitening take?
So I read the directions for my shower, so I was a half hour in between, and then I did my teeth, and then the whole thing.
Okay. Nice. Good. Round of applause. Mutual support. Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. So, do you mind if I share, or do you want to share what you said? So, Adina mentioned that what is it? Washing the dishes as soon as you're done with them is something that you're trying to work on.
Putting away and throwing out cups.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm usually pretty good about stuff, but it's just
Yeah. So I mentioned that I would share. That was one of the habits that I changed over the years. I had two phases. So when I was in yeshiva, this is gonna be disgusting. Okay. When I was in yeshiva in a dorm. Yeah. Then what happened is we had a cleaning crew come in on Wednesdays. Okay.
the dishes would pile up.
So the dishes would just pile up, and people who obviously if you needed to use your dishes, then you would wash them. But then a lot of people would just let the dishes pile up, which is nasty, Yeah. So then what happened when I started living on my own, in my own apartment, then that habit kind of carried over a little bit. So then what I decided to do was my new technique, which I did start a couple of years ago, is because let's review what's habit stacking again.
You attach one habit that you're trying to make to have the order.
Exactly, right? So I already had gotten into the habit of staying hydrated. So I would always go to the sink to get water. So what I did was every time I go to the sink to get water, I'd wash one dish. And once I started washing one dish, I would just wash whatever in the sink. And that way, at the end of the day, I barely had to do any dishes because, it had already been cleaned up, So that was just an example of habit stacking that I wanted to mention. Okay, so today for Atomic Habits, usually we start with a summary. I want to actually start with he has another story in the beginning, okay? And so this is another story here, okay? Yes, we do. We talked about that when you were gone, but yeah. We didn't want to start without you, but I'm glad you're also proud of Emily. Okay, Anne Thorndike, a primary care physician at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, had a crazy idea. She believed she could improve the eating habits of thousands of hospital staff and visitors without changing their willpower or motivation in the slightest way. In fact, she didn't plan on talking to them at all. Anyone want to guess how she changed their eating habits?
She gave them snacks at certain times or something.
Good guess. I'll give you another hint. She didn't even interact with them.
Maybe she made it smell good, and then.
Okay. That's interesting.
Food. Yeah, her food.
What were you saying, Ayala?
Put the stuff what she wanted them to eat in certain.
Bingo. Okay, good. So Thorndike and her colleagues designed a 6-month study to alter the choice architecture. Oh, by the way, that's the name of the thing of the chapter heading. He's good at coming up with habit stacking, implementation, intention, choice architecture. It does, yeah. So 6-month study to alter the choice architecture of the hospital cafeteria. They started by changing how drinks were arranged in the room. Originally, the refrigerators located next to the cash registers in the cafeteria were filled with only soda. The researchers added water as an option to each one. Additionally, they placed baskets of bottled water next to the food stations throughout the room. Soda was still in the primary refrigerators, but water was now available at all drink locations. Over the next 3 months, the number of soda sales at the hospital dropped by 11.4%, which is a lot. Meanwhile, the sales of bottled water increased by 25.8%. That was really a lot. They made similar adjustments and saw similar results with food in the cafeteria. Nobody had said a word to anyone eating there. Okay, so based on this, how would you define choice architecture with emphasis on architecture?
Make it easy.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Make it easy, but specifically by doing what?
Putting it in places where people are more likely.
Yeah, is making it obvious, but by doing it by changing the structure of the environment. Okay, and there's a little map.
It's not going to offer water. Obviously, it's not going to be water. If all the refrigerators had only soda, then obviously the water.
Did they say that there was no water, or just that it was? Oh, they added water. That's true. That's definitely true. Right. So here's just a little diagram here. So before, what does it say? Here's a representation of what the cafeteria looked like with before the environment design changes were made, left and right. The shaded boxes, like that guy and that guy. Yeah, I guess they did have. indicate where bottled water was available in each instance. I guess they added it to the machines, right? Because the amount of water in the environment was increased, behavior shifted naturally and without additional motivation. So now water is available like all over the place. Yeah. Yeah, it is, right? Only on a smaller scale. Yeah. Okay. People often choose products not because of what they are, but because of where they are. Oh, by the way, the reason why there's typos here, remind me after class if you want to see a new piece of technology that's really cool. Okay. I'm not going to interrupt now.
You can take a picture of something that it makes
It's a little bit different. I mean, yes, but it's a little bit different than that. Okay. If I walk into the kitchen and see a plate of cookies on the counter, I'll pick up half a dozen and start eating, even if I hadn't been thinking about them beforehand and didn't necessarily feel hungry. Relatable?
I was thinking about this last night. Actually.
Yeah?
I was thinking like, oh, I'm hungry. Like I should have ice cream. And I'm like, wait, I just came down. That's why I want ice cream. Otherwise, like.
Yeah. Okay, good. Right. So the environment triggers the environment is the cue, which triggers the craving, which then sets the next two in motion. If the communal table at the office is always filled with donuts and bagels, like old shall have it, it's going to be hard not to grab one every now and then. Your habits change depending on the room you were in and the cues in front of you. I was going to say, he gives an example of this also with he says he would buy apples in order to eat healthy, but then he would put them in, the vegetable or fruit crisper drawer in the refrigerator. And so he could just, for apples, and he would forget about it. Some of them are flat, some of them are like a large drawer that you pull out. So what he did was he started keeping the apples in a bowl on his kitchen table, and he finds that he would eat them.
Yeah, and make you realize my cousin always had the bowl of fruit on her table.
Yeah.
Now it's like in the drawer. I won't forget.
Yep, exactly.
It's like your coffee cup.
Yes, like my coffee cup, yeah. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Despite our unique personalities, certain behaviors tend to arise again and again under certain environmental conditions. In church, people tend to talk in whispers. On a dark street, people act wary and guarded. In this way, the most common form of change is not internal, but external. Another typo there. We are changed by the world around us. Every habit is context dependent. And here he comes up with another rule. In 1936, psychologist Kurt Lewin wrote a simple equation that makes a powerful statement. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment, or B equals F of person. Okay, function of the person, of PE, a person in the environment. I don't know if he meant function in the sense of like, it would result in a curve, but these are the two factors that affect things. Okay. Our behavior is not defined by this is another thing. Our behavior is not defined by the objects in the environment, but by our relationship to them, okay? In fact, this is a useful way to think about the influence of the environment on your behavior. Stop thinking about your environment as filled with objects. Start thinking about it as filled with relationships. And he gives two examples. This is a thing with people who have a hard time, like they drink too much, like alcohol. So then sometimes if they make a rule that never drink alone, so then what it'll do is when they're at home, they won't drink, and then they'll have to only worry about drinking when they're in social circumstances, where, or sometimes if you're trying to stop drinking in social circumstances, you have to be aware that being in that environment like leads to drinking. Or anyone have insomnia issues? Like having a hard time falling asleep?
No,
I used to when I was young.
Yeah. Did you have a solution that you used, or you just grew out of it?
No, nothing worked.
Yeah.
I have
Disappeared.
I don't know if I would call it
Once I was in
insomnia.
high
Yeah.
But like during the school year, I used to just have like hard time falling asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a form of insomnia.
So I just watch ASMR.
I would shut off my phone.
Yeah.
Let's say like by midnight. If I stay up past midnight, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like if I'm on my phone. So what I would do is like some nights, if that night I didn't sleep,
Yeah.
I would usually end up staying up really late because I was nervous.
Yeah, I had the same issue.
I'd
Yeah.
stay up late watching TV, and then it'd be past like that brink of time where I won't be able to fall asleep. So I started like just shutting off my phone at like 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Maybe for one night I won't sleep, but
Yeah.
the next night I'll be exhausted
Yeah.
for being up all night, and then I'll fall asleep the next
I can totally relate to that. I have the same problem. Yeah.
Like at the beginning of Corona, like I basically have like no sleep schedule.
Yeah.
Because like I'm at home.
Yeah.
So I have like on my phone, I use like this like bedtime thing set up with my phone. So at a certain hour, my phone will no longer get notifications, and my
Yeah.
screen goes completely dark. So if I don't hear the notifications, I'm not gonna pick up my phone.
So that's a good application of the inverse of make it obvious. Is no, it works. Yeah, make it not obvious, right? Isn't your phone's not going to have all those cues which demand your attention?
No, my more issue was like if I was like in my bed at like 11
Same, I was
or
gonna say it's
something,
not an issue.
I would be like, oh, it's too early to go to sleep. I can't go to sleep.
We'll have to work on your sleep issues in a little while, Emily. We've talked about that before class. Yeah, but anyway, what I was going to say is one of the techniques they give people who have insomnia is if you find yourself in bed tossing and turning, get out of bed and like read or something like that in a different location. Because what happens is if you have one night of insomnia, this is not going to be a problem. But if you have repeated insomnia, you start to associate bed with a place where you can't sleep.
Yeah.
So if you don't linger in bed not sleeping and you do something else in a different location, then when you come to bed, then it's like a fresh environment and it makes it easier to sleep.
Probably why you sleep better when you're on vacation. You ever notice that? Like,
No,
I
no.
Can't sleep on the couch.
Yeah,
Because you're supposed to eat
but either way, I mean, I think both of those are true for this principle, is that your environment changes your sleeping habits, sometimes. One more thing, and then we'll do the summary. The power of context also reveals an important strategy. Habits can be easier to change in a new environment. It helps to escape the subtle triggers and cues that nudge you towards your current habits. Go to a new place, a different coffee shop, a bench in the park, a corner of your room you seldom use, and create a new routine there. So if you're trying to start a new habit, find a new environment. And then he says, when you can't manage to get to an entirely new environment, Corona, redefine or rearrange your current one. Create a separate space for work, study, exercise, entertainment, and cooking. The mantra I find useful is one space, one use. So speaking of Corona, this actually helped with me when we switched to Zoom learning in the spring, is that I used to only have, so I have my bed and then my desk, and I have my computer on my desk, and I used to only do all my school stuff like, in my room next to my bed. And then I realized when Corona started that I don't want to spend all my life in my room. So I created like a kind of like an office space in my living room. And anytime I did school stuff, I'd be out there. And anytime I did me stuff, I'd be in my room on my desk. And that helped keep things separate and like establish those Corona routines in a healthier way.
I'm trying that now because Toro's all online.
Yeah.
In my room doing college.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if you can find a different space, then that'd be best.
People work in my house. I only have my
Yeah.
desk in my bed.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have choices, and that's why I liked where he said even a corner of the room or like a different position sometimes, like if you sit on a different, different direction,
Angle or
right,
something.
just anything to make it so you're seeing something different can establish a new habit. So the summary of chapter 6, which is what we just went through, is small changes in context could lead to large changes in behavior over time. Every habit is initiated by a cue. We are more likely to notice cues that stand out. Make the cues of good habits obvious in your environment, and gradually your habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior. The context becomes the cue. Okay. And it's easier to build new habits in a new environment because you were not fighting against the old cues. What I wanted to now show you before we go into Hilchos Teshuvah for Hilchos Teshuvah's sake is going through this chapter and just thinking about the cues made me look at that halacha we did in a different light, for Teshuvah Gemura. What would James Clear say about Teshuvah Gemura? What part would he be like, ooh, about?
Well, he's in the same place.
Exactly, same place and all the same cues, right? So Teshuvah Gemura is when you are in an environment with the same cues and you refrain because of the Teshuvah, okay?
Wow, that's hard.
Yeah, it is very hard. And again, I don't think this is giving us like a new idea here, but it's framing it in the language of cues, which I thought was pretty interesting. Also, this is a halacha we haven't done yet. If you want to actually this is a good time to get our Rambams. So let's get your Rambams there. I don't need one today. Oh, so are you gonna try putting your?
Grew up since I was like 3. I've been drinking Diet Coke. My mom used to put it in our bottles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to, so it's really hard, and like I have like periods of time where like
Yeah.
it's not like 6 months.
Yeah.
And I like crave it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I need to work on that. I must have really good self-control.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Emily doesn't
Like my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I go buy the
Thank you, Remington, who left it in.
Yeah.
Are you complimenting yourself or?
No, someone here.
So go to Hilchos Teshuvah chapter 2, halacha 4. Okay, if someone has it, you can tell us the page.
148.
148. Thank you.
Where are you?
Okay, so would someone like to read? I think it's 2:4. It starts. Yeah, go ahead, Ayala. Yeah.
So midarcha hatshuva liyot hashav so ik tamed lefnei Hashem. So from the ways of tshuva,
Yep.
to be.
Yeah, the shav here he's using as a noun for the person who did tshuva, the returned person. Good.
Bivkli u'b'sachanunim, with crying and supplication.
Good.
Vosa tzedakah kafi kofa, and he should give tzedakah according to his ability.
Yep.
U'mishrachli karbemin hadavar shechata bo, and to distance himself a lot from the thing which he sinned with.
Good.
U'mishana shemo, and change his name. Kilomar, as if to say, sha'ani acher, that I am different, like a different person.
Yeah, a different person. Yeah.
Ve'ino osi ha'esh asa osan hamasim, and I am not that man who did those actions.
Yeah.
U'mishana masav kulan l'tova l'darach l'shara, and he changes the action like completely
Yeah. Good.
to good and to a straight way.
Yep.
V'golam imkomo, and he
Like galus.
was exiled from his place.
Yeah. Yeah. So he should exile himself from this place.
Shegalot mechaper avon. He's exiled.
That he's talking about exile itself. That exile atones for iniquity or for sin. It gives kapara.
V'nei shegorem lo lehi hana v'liot anav v'shval
Yeah.
because it causes him to.
Hikana is a weird word. Is to be submissive, like to be willing to subordinate his own will to someone else's or to God's will in this case.
And to be humble and
Low, low is very good. Okay, so before we talk about the particulars here, yesterday we talked about, or 2 days ago, we talked about the definition of how to do tshuva. This he's calling darchei hatshuva. So from the context, what do you think he means by darchei hatshuva? Because you would, if I just said derech tshuva, you would think that is the method for how to do tshuva, but he's already said that a couple halachos earlier. So what is darchei hatshuva then? Good, how to continue it, right? And what proof can you bring from the way he introduces this, that this is talking about continuing tshuva? A person who did tshuva. So we're talking, if you've already done tshuva, this is how you maintain your tshuva, okay? So I would like to understand all of these, but does anything jump out at you as something that James Clear would get excited about? Say again? Yeah, he's the guy who did the Atomic Habits, yeah.
That he's setting himself up the upright path. All of his. He's removing himself from everything.
So number one is removing himself. Oh, actually, I'll give you a hint. I forgot I highlighted these. Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to highlight this is the return. That's the point we made. Okay, distancing himself exceedingly from the thing in which he transgressed. So what does that have to do with the Atomic Habits?
When you're not supposed to do it, you don't do that.
Exactly. You're avoiding the cues. Okay. Now, what problem does this seem to bring in, given what we've learned about tshuva so far and tshuva gemura?
That you don't. That's why I was so confused.
Yeah.
You're saying you're remove it before you literally just said that the full way to do it is that you're in the same place as your child.
Okay, so it seems like a contradiction. We'll answer it in a second, right? If you have an answer, then we'll say it in a second. Just let me set up the question here. So he started off the chapter by saying tshuva gemura is you're in the exact same situation, and you don't sin. But now he's telling, and it seems like tshuva gemura is a good thing. Now he seems to be saying that you should distance yourself from the thing that you sinned with. So it sounds like a contradiction. So how would you resolve the contradiction?
This is specifically talking about after you've done tshuva, to continue the process of tshuva, you're always trying to separate yourself from those cues. But someone who you would call someone who did tshuva gemura is after they've done this, if something had happened, where they ran into those cues again and they didn't do it, then they had done completely.
Exactly. I think you have to say that, which is that you should not try to do tshuva gemura by putting yourself in the same situation as you sinned before. But tshuva gemura, when the Rambam gave that case, is just saying what would be a case where we could point to this and say you did the best tshuva possible is if you found yourself in that same situation and you didn't sin. But don't tempt fate, your Yetzer Hara, by trying to actually like put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, and maybe you should just first do like the tshuva and work on yourself and remove yourself from that situation.
Yeah.
If like not a year later, but like a while later, you are in that same situation. That's when you say you did.
Exactly. Now, sometimes you can't avoid being in the same situation permanently. Like, let's say you sinned when you interacted inappropriately. Let's say, like, you spoke lashon hara about a family, like a relative that you see every year, right? So, like, you're going to see them again the next year, you know? So, like, sometimes you can't just avoid it. And then you would find yourself in a situation where you could say, okay, here's the Tshuva Gemara test, But he's saying, generally speaking, you should try to avoid the cues because that's just going to predispose you to doing the chet again. Okay, good. Now, what about this green part? He should change his name as if to say, I am someone else and I'm not the same person who did those actions. Yeah, Ayala?
So this is what we were saying in the beginning.
Yeah. Yes.
Where you're saying like the actions don't define me, and like I'm now going to change my actions, so I'm going to be someone else.
Exactly. Good. So this was the first Atomic Habits chapter I brought up before you guys even read the chapter at home, which was identity. The best way to change your actions is to change your identity and to say, I'm not the type of person who does this. And when you change your name and people call you a different thing, then it's easier for you to think of yourself in a different way. Okay. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting? This would be very hard to do practically just because of a lot of reasons. Can you imagine if every year at Rosh Hashanah, you took on a new name and you kept that name for the entire year? I think it would be much easier to think of yourself as you're starting a new chapter of your life or you're starting a new path, It's just that obviously that would get really annoying and you'd have to do a bunch of legal stuff to change your name, But when do people tend to not do this for tshuva? I can think of two cases commonly, not so commonly, but cases you've observed where people change their name. One is when they're very sick, right? And how would that help, or how would this help with that? Why would you change your name then? So you could do tshuva and be in a better place, right? I think there are people who think that what kind of name change do people usually have?
English.
They usually add a name, right? And what kind of name? Some tefillah name, right? So give me examples. Raphael, which has to do with refuah, Chaim, which has to do with life, right? What about women? What are they typically? I feel like there are also.
Sarah,
Right. It could just be people role models. Chaya, right? The Chaya is the one. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there are people who are under the impression that that's they relate to that as almost like a magical thing, the Malcham Avos is not going to get me because I'm someone different, but that's not how it works. Really, it's you change your actions in order to motivate you to do tshuva or to solidify the tshuva that you've done, with the hopes that when you change your identity and change your actions, then God will relate to you differently, So that's the idea there. And what's the other time when people take on a new name?
They can't get married.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't think about that example. That's a similar thing, right? Yeah.
Well,
Or if they get a really bad reputation on dating apps, and so they need to change their name to yeah.
My sister's friend's name was Gabby, and she changed it to Sarah. So every time we have to, I'm like, oh, Gabby. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. But people also do it when the name starts to have bad connotations.
That is true. Yeah, right. And that could be for this reason, or it could just be because they don't want the bad connotations of the name. I was thinking a lot of people, when they convert to Judaism, if they have a non-Jewish name, then they'll take on a Jewish name, like an obviously non-Jewish name, and that also helps because you are starting a new path and you're actually getting a new halachic identity. And so some people do that because they're not comfortable being called by a non-Jewish name. Some people do it for a tshuva type process. Only you can't call it tshuva because they're not returning. It's similar to this, but not to avoid your past identity because of bad actions, but to start a new identity, to forge a new identity. Okay, and then exiling yourself from your place. What would James Clear say about that?
Making it hard.
The cues, right? The environmental cues, which we just talked about today, right? Now, Rambam gives a different reason. He says it makes you submissive and humble. Okay, which I think is also true. But you're number one, you're avoiding the entire environment. If you let's say you lived a gangster lifestyle in a certain city, and you move to a new city, so then all of those cues that draw you back into that lifestyle are not going to be there anymore, But what do you think of the Rambam means though, that galus makes you submissive and humble? How does that work?
You're not in Israel at the time, I guess you don't have the same.
Oh, sorry. Let me clarify. When he says galus, he does not mean leaving Israel. He means from your own city, moving to their city. And I'll ask this question here: have any of you in your preteen or teenage years moved to a different city? And I'm not just saying moving from Brooklyn to West Hempstead or something like that, where you're going to the same school or whatever, but completely new new school, new friends, new everything. No? Yeah. I mean, it's a hard experience. Yeah, it's hard and exciting. You want to guess? Because I've done this and I can tell you, but I want you to guess first. How does this make you submissive and humble?
Start with someone, with new people, where you're like, haven't done, like you have not so much to learn about the new person yet.
Right. So definitely, I understand how it's a new start. But what I'm asking is, how does it make you humble or lowly or submissive?
You're really awkward. You're not like a bitch.
The bottom of the toilet.
Yeah. Right.
Your
So
lunch money.
yeah. Okay. Good. What are you saying, Ayala?
No, like it's really awkward and you don't feel like in your place, so then you're not gonna speak up.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm gonna state it one level underneath, and then I think that what you guys are saying flows from that is you don't realize how much of your own identity is based on how people are constantly reflecting back to you the image that you put out to them. In other words, like let's say like Leah, how long have you guys known Leah for? 3 years, some of you longer, right? So Leah is constantly like, she has a personality and she's acting and speaking in certain ways, and then you start to form an image in your mind of who Leah is, and you're kind of reflecting that back at her. It's like when you interact with people who you know, it's almost like you're looking in a mirror and they're reflecting back to you the version of yourself that is a combination of who you put forward and who and what comes from your relationship with them. Okay, when you go to a new place, there is no version of you that people know, and it's almost like a reset in terms of your identity. Like no one knows you. You have to like actively form a version of yourself, which is going to be dependent on how they respond to the signals that you're giving them. I mean, that's kind of an abstract way of putting it, but like you lack that mirror, and it's very easy. Like I can say when my big thing was when I moved from Eastern Washington to Seattle and converted to Judaism and started a Jewish school and all that, it's very easy to like lose your sense of identity because you don't realize that your whole view of yourself was being propped up and reinforced by all of your friends and your environment. And so when you go to a new place, you lose all of that. You have to kind of start from scratch, and the social factors that you two mentioned make it even harder to do that because no one is going to notice you or view you in a certain way unless like you take action to like put that out into the world.
Humbleness comes from the fact that you have no identity.
Yeah, that you have no identity or a blank identity, and you have to like build it from the bottom up. Yeah, and you're kind of subject to all of their assumptions, right? Like let's say like you are a quiet person when you're around people who you don't know, so you're kind of stuck in that position when you're when you're in a new environment. Like you have to like force your way into that, or like let's say you're a very loud person and you broadcast your personality. So with your friends, they kind of have a context for that. But when you're in a new place and you just start like being a loudmouth, then people might form first impressions. And then you're subject to their first impressions. You're kind of at the mercy of the social view of everyone else. Yeah. I had to talk about this with the last year's 9th and 10th graders when they're all going to new schools, because it's a hard thing to do. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a special talk. It was in our study skills, but yeah. Okay. So what didn't we explain? We didn't explain the white things, right? So crying out in prayer before Hashem continually with crying and supplication. So how's that going to help you maintain your tshuva? Yeah. So.
And for that step where you say, Hashem witnesses, or is witnesses that you're not going to.
Right. Okay, good. So certainly Hashem, when he helps you, then that's good. But I think there's another thing psychologically. In other words, tefillah itself helps the way tefillah always does, either because it changes you or because of hashgacha. But I think there's a psychological effect that if you constantly are asking Hashem for help in maintaining your tshuva, yeah, it keeps you humble and it helps you realize how easily you can just like slip back into your old ways. Mm-hmm. But if you're constantly realizing there are so many like factors that I'm not in control of and I need Hashem to help me with this, it keeps you on guard against like slipping back into old ways. What about tzedakah? And this is something of, just like people give tzedakah during Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, people give tzedakah on a tainus, how does tzedakah help maintain your tshuva?
You might have made it, but it's not really yours. You have to give it around.
So that's a good example about how tzedakah itself helps with being humble. And we've talked about how being humble is part of tshuva, but I feel like we need one little bridge to join the two ideas, like for example, being in a sukkah also keeps you humble because it makes you realize that you're like subject to the elements, but he doesn't say doing sukkah keeps your tshuva, Okay, good, right? So tzedakah is it's an intrinsically selfless act, or not. It's, if you don't like the word selfless, it's focused on others, right? That you are giving your hard-earned money to people, like Emily said, and you're acknowledging someone else, and it's forcing you to recognize other people's needs that override your own wants. So how does that help with tshuva, though? I think you're right that it has to do with the selflessness, but how does it help with tshuva?
Because when you do sin, you're doing something selfish. Now you're trying to transform it into something.
Okay, I do think that it has to do with that. Yeah, right. Is that a hate is acting impulsively to satisfy an urge of some sort, which is, and you're blocking out other considerations. Like, let's say if it's a bein adam l'chavero hate, you're blocking out the harm that you're doing to the other person. If it's a bein adam l'makom hate, you're blocking out the reality of Hashem and the world that he set up, and only focusing on, I have a desire for pleasure, or I need to avoid pain, and it's a very self-centered thing. So if you're constantly giving tzedakah, it is a way to keep you in a framework where you're not just focused on yourself, and that's like a tether and like an anchor to a non-selfish framework. Yeah. Changing all of his deeds for the good and on the upright path. So this is a funny one, right? Because he's saying, if you do tshuva on a hate, one thing that'll keep your tshuva going is do tshuva on everything else, like change everything for the good. It's just like, I don't know, there's something funny about that, but any ideas on this one? This one I don't feel like I have a clear grasp on.
The literal meaning is not so realistic.
You mean of changing all your deeds for the good? Yeah, right.
Maybe it's like, don't end it here. Like, once you change this action, keep it going and change all the.
Okay, good. I think that's a good approach, which is that I haven't seen James Clear talk about this yet, but I'd imagine if you just change one thing, so then you are essentially the same, but you're changing one aspect, right? So that's why he says try to change your identity. And I feel like if you start a bunch of new good things, then it's easier to cultivate a new persona of a person who's involved in doing good things, and that momentum, that identity momentum can carry you forward to maintain the tshuva that you did in one area, let's say you want to start, what do you guys do for chesed hours? Right, let's take that as an example, right? Friendship circle. So let's say before you started doing that, what did you do at Friendship Circle? I just don't know the activities or the responsibilities.
Yeah, you hang out there, you make them
Yeah. Okay, good. So it's relationship building and becoming friends. Yeah. So that's not something that you naturally did probably before you did Friendship Circle? You didn't go out, or is that something you did? I don't want to make assumptions. Right, not practically, right? So you can imagine how if you don't view yourself as a type of person who does that, and then you start doing that and you attach to it a bunch of other good stuff, right? Like a bunch of other good activities. It's almost like habit stacking, but it's like identity bundling, you're bundling a bunch of good things in the identity, and then that new version of the Emily who goes to Friendship Circle and makes friends with people who she wouldn't ordinarily associate with, that momentum carries you forward. Yeah. Okay, so this is how you maintain your tshuva. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, so let's briefly talk about, we were going to talk about Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, okay? What makes, and I was trying to remember a question, Elisheva, that you asked that had to do with this. It was like yesterday or the day before, we said something and you were like, it was like, you asked something like specifically on Rosh Hashanah? You don't think so? Okay, fine. Maybe it wasn't you. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the question is what is different about doing tshuva on on the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah versus the rest of the year? No, we could consult the recording if we need to, but I just didn't do it. Yeah.
Oh, you're asking?
I'm asking you. Yeah. Yeah, before we read the Rambam.
Aseres Ymei Teshuvah or Rosh Hashanah?
Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. What do you know, or what do you think?
Yeah, Hashem's always listening.
Yeah, Hashem's always listening, right?
I don't really say that they specifically open.
Yeah, right. But yet we do say stuff like that, right?
We say that his gates are open until you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so one thing. Okay, so let's actually take that. I split this into two parts. One thing that is different is that we are being judged on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in terms of whatever we say that judgment is, and that does make the tshuva different. But because the outcome is more immediate, right? But there are statements in Chazal that the tshuva is somehow better during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, not just because you're going to be judged. So that's what I want to focus on first. What makes the tshuva better?
Because it is the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah are like a focus point. Like the whole year you have, but like it's like kind of like the pressure to do it a little.
Okay, good. What creates that pressure?
I think it's a societal thing.
Okay.
People around you.
Yeah. All right. Good. So this is actually the first answer. What were you going to say, Ayala?
I was gonna say like because it's in the right framework of Malchus Hashem, like.
Ooh,
it makes
okay.
the tshuva correctly.
Okay, good. That's another biggie. Okay, good. Because you, like we said yesterday, and probably that you had, on Friday also, you kick off the, or like I was saying for, that was what yesterday we were talking about, how on Rosh Hashanah, ironically, we don't focus on personal bakashos because there we're focused on setting up the framework of Malchus Hashem, and then that changes the way we do tshuva throughout the 10 days. Yeah, that's a good answer also. So I was going to focus on what Elisheva said. So Rambam in Tshuva, Hilchos Teshuvah Bet Halacha Vav. So this is like close to where we just were. He says, Afal Pisha Tshuva v'Hatza'aka Yafa La'olam. Even though Tshuva and crying out to Hashem are always appropriate or beautiful, however you want to say it, Aseres Hayom Shebein Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim Hi Yafa B'Yoser. They're more appropriate between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. Umiyad Hi Miskabelas, and they are accepted immediately. Okay, except that's weird. What's weird about they're accepted immediately? Okay, that's a good question on it, but I'm saying like that phrasing. Yeah, what does it mean? Because I understand like Kabbalah's tefillah, we talk about a lot, like God is makabel our tefillah, makabel our tshuva. Like what exactly does that mean? Okay. Shnemar, as it says, Dirshu Hashem bihimatza okra uhu biyoso karov. Seek Hashem when he is to be found, call him when he is close. Okay, now this is the key point. When does that apply? When does it apply that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are better for tshuva? B'yachid, for an individual. Aval bat tzibur, but a community. Kol zman she'osin tshuva v'tzolinkin b'leiv shalem heinen. Anytime the community does tshuva and they cry out with a full heart, then they are answered. Shnemar kadashem elkeinu b'chol kareinu elav, like Hashem or God whenever we call to him. So this adds a point of clarity, which is in line with what Elisheva said. What is special about the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, or like what makes the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah better for tshuva?
As a community, like we're all together.
That the whole community is involved in it, and if you wanted to get that same level of tshuva at a different time of year, what could you do? Get the whole community to be involved in tshuva. So to me, this is like a mind-blowing idea, is that it's not like God is only listening or like only willing to forgive during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. It's that he's willing to listen and accept your tshuva when the whole community is involved. And during Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, all of Klal Yisrael is involved. But theoretically, anytime the community gets together and does tshuva, then it would have the exact same quality to it. Not the judgment thing. That is specifically Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but the fact that the whole community is involved, and that's because of the social reality and the social pressure that it, good. This gets back to atomic habits, right? Is when everyone is involved in tshuva, it's much easier to jump on the bandwagon and to start looking at your life. Or let's say everyone. What does everyone ask each other between their Aseres Ymei Teshuvah? Like, yeah, do you forgive me? Right now, people do that in a way that is, a lot of people do it in a they're just trying to get rid of their guilt, or they're just doing it because because they think they're supposed to. But it actually is helpful because it's a socially acceptable thing to bring up past, bein adam l'chavero issues, and once it's socially acceptable, then more people will feel comfortable doing it. So I think that's part of what makes tshuva. So tshuva is more accessible during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah when everyone is focused on it. There's an example of this. There's two examples. I'm not going to give the first one.
It's kind of like when everyone says Tehillim together.
Is it like, what do you guys think? Is it like when everyone says Tehillim together?
I would say in a way, in that you're all thinking of the same thing, you all have the same goals.
Or like when, like during Corona, there were all those times that like the whole world was supposed to stay together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so I think it's similar in the sense that like there's a recognition that we're all involved in the same thing, but there's something that is more personal about Teshuvah where you're actually trying to change yourself than Tefillah. Tefillah and Tehillim are more like for most people an independent action. So like even when you're saying it with a lot of people, you're doing an independent thing. Here it's like this is also it's also, how should I say
It's
it?
like a mutual understanding.
Yeah.
You bring up a problem with your friend at that time, they get it.
Yeah.
But at certain times, people wouldn't be open to conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also, it's like it provides a socially acceptable excuse for bringing up something like this when that mutual understanding will make it easier and less awkward. You know, I mean, it's always gonna be awkward, but yeah. Like there's this podcast I listened to where the podcasters wanted to create a national holiday called Email Debt Forgiveness Day, where, you know, sometimes you get an email and like you don't answer it, and then the longer it goes, the more awkward it is to answer it, and you just like,
Like a text message.
Oh shoot!
Yeah.
When you ignore that text for like a day, they know you're on WhatsApp. Like they.
yeah, it's right.
Oh,
So,
you can see last scene.
Yeah.
oh, that's the worst. Yeah,
Oh, I said that.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
Some people stop you and they're like, you're online.
Yeah.
When I was a bus counselor, all the moms would see me on WhatsApp and just text me like crazy.
Yeah.
So then I shut it off.
Yeah. Good move. So, so what these guys wanted to do is they wanted to create a national holiday where it's I forgot what day it is, sometime in April, where on that day it becomes socially acceptable to respond to emails that you've ignored for like a long time, and without having to. And then the idea is they want to create this holiday, and like then we can all like respond to all these emails without feeling the guilt of like, how's the other person going to look at me, you know? So they're trying to create like a situation where it's socially acceptable to respond to an email really, really late, you know? So I don't think they're going to succeed, but whatever.
There's an email I sent to you like one summer asking you a question, and then you sent me this great answer, and I read it. And I just never emailed you back. I
Yeah.
so guilty ever since then.
Yeah, you should. No, I forgive you, Leah. Yeah. It happens more frequently than you would think. Yeah, that doesn't make it right, but yeah. Okay. Okay. So then, so that's one way that Teshuvah during this time is different. Really quickly, because we don't have that much time. Oh yeah. So he talks about shofar, right? Wake up. That was what we did before. And then there's this mashal of, for the whole year long, you should see yourself as though you're half zakai and half chayav, half innocent or exonerated and half like liable. And if you do one mitzvah, you tip the scale of yourself and the world to the good side, and you can save yourself in the world. And if you do one chait, then you tip yourself to the bad side and destroy the world, right? And he says that that's the whole year long. Okay, we think about it though between the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah because of the judgment, but really it's a reality the whole year long. And I guess the question I wanted to pose, which I don't think we're gonna have time to answer today, is like, I'm sure you've heard this idea since you were a kid, right? In some form, like you can like tip the scales, right? To me, the problem is it sounds like an exaggeration. Like really, like you do one chait and you can tip yourself and everything to the side of destruction, but then like is that really true? And also like you're supposed to reset after you do that and then think of yourself as a Benoni again, you know? So what I wanted to pose this question to you of like, is there an understanding we can have of this halacha which is more realistic and reasonable, you know? And if we succeed in understanding that, so then the Rambam ties that to, he says, because of this, the entire house of Israel is accustomed to increase their charity and their good actions and to involve themselves in mitzvahs between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim more than the rest of the year. And they're accustomed to get up at night during the 10 days to daven in synagogues with words of supplication and subjugation until daybreak. That's slichos. So the Rambam is connecting this idea of being in the balance all year long. He's connecting that to the practice of how we view the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. So let's leave that as a question that we think about over Rosh Hashanah and the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah and see if we can answer it next time. Okay, so 4-minute break until English.